To the Nonprofit Report, your weekly update on nonprofit organizations, issues, and leaders. I'm your host, Mark Oppenheim, and today we'll talk about fundraising Today we will talk about fundraising for performing arts organizations during COVID with guests Dale Hedding, Vice President of Development with Chicago Symphony Orchestra, and Danielle St.Germain-Gordon, Chief Development Officer at San Francisco Ballet. Sorry for tripping over my tongue and a reminder to Zoom attendees that we will take 3 snap polls during the show and we'll announce results, and questions submitted through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen will be included in our discussion. So thank you for joining us. This is great to have you both here and to talk about fundraising for performing arts. We're in challenging times. Thank you for sharing your experience with us today.
Great to be here.
Really fun to be here at 8 o'clock in the morning. Good morning.
At 8 o'clock in the morning and 11 o'clock for you, Dale. Dale, why don't we start for you, since you've had a little bit more time to have your coffee.
That's right.
And let's talk about what you're experiencing during this really challenging time for the performing arts in Chicago.
Sure, and it's certainly been several months of constant transition, adjustments. I think so many of us probably assumed we were in it for just a few months when we started, and a few months more, and then we thought we'd survive the summer. Now it appears we're in it for a while, and that has caused tremendous upheaval in a lot of major performing arts organizations, particularly deciding, at what point do you toggle between live performances, small audiences, or now none because we can't, and how do you respond to that? So I would say in Chicago, we jumped very early on into a direction we've been meaning to go for a while, which is to start getting much more engaged in the virtual world and providing our performances, but particularly our community education outreach programs virtually to schools and other communities. So this just really accelerated that process for us. So as we go on through the conversation, I'll share a few things, particularly as they pertain to fundraising. But I would say in Chicago, we have been in a very rapid plan, replan mode, adjustments, program, then reprogram what we programmed. But the point is we've been getting content and performances and education material out in the community this whole time, from scrappy in someone's kitchen to now it's much more professionally produced. So yeah, I think we're just all evolving quickly, and that's been our story here in Chicago.
And just for full disclosure, we recruited both Dale Hedding and Danielle to their respective positions. One of the things that happened during the search that resulted in Dale's selected by Jeff Alexander is Jeff was dealing with a musician strike at the time. The board and Jeff were trying to reshape how the symphony would function. And so what Dale is talking about, this whole idea of trying to reshape a classic arts organization for the modern world, is very much on everyone's mind. And Danielle, you're also ensconced in this whole transformation, aren't you?
Oh, indeed. So I arrived just about 2.5 years ago, and I'd spent my life in the world of theater. I'd come from the Guthrie Theater, and prior to that, the Arena Stage in Washington, D.C., and the Shakespeare Theater.
So you know drama.
Pardon me?
You know drama.
Oh, I sure do. And this has been the year of it, hasn't it? And so I arrived, and then shortly after my arrival, within not too long, pardon me, Glenn McCoy, our lovely executive director, decided that it was time for him to move to Sonoma and grow tomatoes. So talk about cataclysmic change. So we were able to recruit, actually you recruited, or you placed Kelly Tweedale as executive director. So she arrived last September, and everything felt just great, right? So September comes, Nutcracker comes. There was a moment in February that in our neighborhood in San Francisco, the entire power grid went out, and it was one evening's performance. And there were probably 2,500 people in the house. And I remember that night, all of us gathering to say, what are we going to do? How do we, all the money we're going to lose from these tickets, and how do we fill these people, how do we get them back into the performance? Only did we know, 3 weeks later, our season ended on March 6th, which was opening night and closing night of A Midsummer Night's Dream. So it's been, for those of us who love change, this has been a thrilling year. For those who don't, I think it's been the opposite.
So how do we move forward? Because I believe, and I'm really interested to hear how you're experiencing this. I believe that this is a moment where everything is coming together to say, if you haven't been listening about the need for change, we've got your attention now. You know, I feel like, you know, the universe is whispering in our ear, but at a considerable volume. How do we adjust? And we've talked a little bit, Dale, you were indicating this sort of online thing. Let's talk a little bit about how you're adjusting in both the short term, but also on a sustained basis, so that you have audiences and that you're able to monetize that attention in support of the arts so that it's sustainable.
Yeah, so look, one of the core tenets of any great fundraising program, of course, is communication, but engagement with patrons. And I think over the last several years, one of the things that's happening in successful programs is they are spending a lot more time explaining to donors what the organization does, how it operates, basically what we do with your very generous support.
And who is the donor? When you say donor, who is the donor? Is it a small group? Is it a large group? Is it large? Are you just talking about major gifts people, or are you talking?
No, I'm talking about all the way across the board. Large donors, small donors. You know, we spend a lot more time with large major donors, of course, but it's patrons, people that we expect and hope to be donors in the coming seasons. So yeah, I think that should be what successful programs are doing these days. So that became absolutely, you know, a life-saving tool during the pandemic here. You know, we very early on, by the summer, we were starting to organize a large series of Zoom conversations with donors, with the president and the chairman of the board, with major donors and our campaign donors, with staff, with musicians, with more medium-sized donor groups. But the point was, we were trying to get information in front of the patrons and donors often. And back then it was critical. Nobody knew, are you paying musicians or not? Are you canceling? How are staff doing? What's going on? So yeah, we just immediately went to a mode of delivering messaging in all kind of crazy ways, including starting to do these musician-driven performances from their kitchens. I mean, just 10 minutes, we've got that one great video of one of our violinists is a new mom with baby on her back and the little baby sack, playing a quartet herself with the baby, feeding the baby in between pieces. It was really, you know, that kind of stuff is really endearing. And that was a standard for a while. You just got something out and you stayed in your people's lives. And now, of course, the expectations have gone up. People expect it to be more polished, a little more, you know, serious. And so it's been, you know, I think we jumped early on. And that's why even with that terrible year, we closed June, you know, we thought we'd be $4 or $5 million under our $25 million annual fund goal. We actually hit the goal, and we had 3,000 more donors, households, than we did the year before, because we were already on this path when the pandemic hit. But we just accelerated that communication once we got going. And in a little bit, we can talk more about what we're doing now in the fall, but I'll start the conversation with that.
Well, that's so wonderful. And Danielle, when you and I were interacting initially, before you even came on, you were talking about blurring the lines between marketing, the connection with the audience, and development. Has that continued, this whole idea that everybody who is a patron is a donor, everybody who's a potential patron is also part of that whole circle?
Yeah, it sure has. It's actually been super fun. So we, going back to March, it feels like walk down memory lane. So we lose our season March 6th. To be successful in these times, you need a number of things, but the top three for me are a capable, resilient, responsive team, a board that says, there's the horizon, race for it, and leadership that trusts you, right? So I have the trifecta completely in this moment. So on March 25th, so it was, 19 days after we lost our season, we had a complete new microsite up, and we branded it the Critical Relief Fund. And there was a moment in a staff meeting, a small group, where we were talking about like how much, and we figured back a napkin, we were gonna lose probably $10 million. It was 60% of our season. So I'm like, you know, I think we can raise 5. What's it? So all of a sudden, 5 was the budget. We were going to raise $5 million by June 30th. So I'm very, very pleased to announce that we raised $5 million by July 16th. So we were a little late, 16 days late, but we we crested $5 million. And from that moment, we decided that there's a patron, and the spend to the ballet is what matters. It's not if it's a tax deductible gift or a 2 box seats on a Saturday night. So we've chosen to go down that path. This fall, for example, when we announced that our season was going digital, we scheduled 2 town hall meetings. And the criteria for the first one was donors above 25,000 or subscribers with a spend of 5,000 or more, because we can speak to them, because that's a huge investment. And we're finding from those conversations, we then announced digital, almost 80% of subscribers to date have donated their tickets back. So all of a sudden, we're talking to them from the very patron-centric thing. And all of us in the performing arts, or in performing arts, maybe everywhere, we know that marketing and development, that can be a tenuous thing. Like, who's in the front seat? And right now it feels particularly good.
I was standing in Kansas City with someone who was running a performing arts organization, and we were watching school kids, young school kids, holding hands, walking in to the theater. And he just smiled, leaned back, and he said, "Ah, future patrons." And I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, and future donors." He said, "Love starts here." And how do you deal with the educational piece? Because education is so often this sort of in-person piece, but it is so important, particularly in getting young people involved and also in correcting some of the historic imbalances in our audiences. Our audiences are too white, too monoculture, too old, right? And we want to retain all those people who have always supported this art, but we want to also understand our own deficiencies in the past and invite people in, change our companies, change the racial, ethnic mix of the performers and also of the audience members. How do you deal with the education piece, Dale? Are you putting some of that content online as well?
We are, and quite frankly, that's the more nimble part of the organization right now, just because of in-hall activity, testing of musicians, programming. So we've got our Nagani Music Institute, which is the name for our music education community, all of our programs under one big, wonderful umbrella there. So through the summer, that was one of the things we decided early on, no matter what, even when it looked like we were going to lose the fall season for sure, we were going to change the programming and get creative with our institute programs. So we started a couple of new series. We have something called CSO for Kids, which are children's books, which have been animated with working with Chicago Children's Theater, narrated with musician playing music behind it. So product lines that we could effectively use to share with school systems, the libraries were excited to have these in the city, and just make them free to everybody on the website. So things like that. We've got the Civic Orchestra, which is also in our Nagani Music Institute. So they are also doing programming and teaching methods for school teachers that are working with young students in music programs. So we're basically trying to stay very mission focused still, just delivering it in a very different way. And strangely enough, we had planned on some pretty good fundraising setbacks this year with no onstage activity probably happening. But it turns out, this stuff is very attractive. The donors have been incredibly supportive because a lot of this takes new technology for us. We launched a whole new platform we call CSO TV, where we put most of this virtual content. But we needed, better equipment, like everybody, the increased platform. So donors have been very supportive of this for the purpose of keeping the Institute programs live in a different way and active. Same thing for the digital concerts we're recording. But yeah, I think this content has been really important because it's also let us focus this year on informing donors more about all the things we've always done in the community. But when you're such a world famous orchestra like this is, that the orchestra obviously garners a lot of attention because it's truly spectacular what it does, but we're also all these other things in the community. So it's been a good chance this year for us to showcase that and talk about it more.
And Danielle, you have different challenges when it comes to education. You have a ballet school. You also have a school that trains your future stars on stage, and those are associated but different functions. And it's very difficult when you're talking about a physical instead of an oral discipline to provide the same kind of virtual experience. How are you confronting the educational piece that is so important to the engagement of the community?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I feel like everything Dale said, you could insert San Francisco Ballet and it's the same story, right? So we have our San Francisco Ballet School where those classes all went virtual over the summer. We have seen the dedication of our young people who are on their path to their dream, where they are at their bar in their either kitchen or their living room or their bedroom, and they're on Zoom. And with our education outreach into the schools, it's a little different. San Francisco Unified School District, there's a lovely TV show they launched in the spring called San Francisco Loves Learning. And San Francisco Ballet was invited to have a spot every day. So I think there's been maybe 80 episodes, and talk about scrappy, nimble. They basically have their iPhones, they're in their kitchens. They're making very innovative, very engaging content for kids. And it's hard because our dance in schools and communities, we're in our 41st year. And at San Francisco Ballet, we love acronyms. So it's called DISC. So to an outsider, they read, San Francisco's DISC, and DISC is something you throw, or what is DISC? So we're learning that, we actually to tell people what this means. And when they hear that we've been doing it for 41 years. And it's thrilling to know the commitment from our education and training teams, just that no matter what, they were going to continue serving those children in the Title I schools in the city.
It's so interesting. And by the way, viewers, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We'll try to get those in. We just completed a poll in which we asked whether COVID is going to change the landscape here. And I think you're describing how it is. And you're indicating that this change, which is an advance, right? It is a benefit. This change is going to sustain beyond that. About 90% of the people felt that the change was going to be sustained. 10% felt that things were going to snap back. We're asking another question, which is about fundraising. In terms of fundraising, just to get your answer on this, in terms of fundraising techniques, the actual nuts and bolts and the workflows and the systems, Danielle, that you use, is that going to shift in fundamental ways going forward in your experience? We're taking a poll right now, so we're kind of anticipating the answers. We have quite a few respondents already. So before the poll ends, I'm just going to ask you, will this be a sustained change, and will you add to your tool set?
Absolutely. So we decided to use a microsite, a platform that's not on our website, that's not related to us at all, called Classy. And it looks, when you go to our site, which I think we'll share after this call,
right.
You would never know you're not on the San Francisco Ballet website. It has allowed us to go more grassroots. There's a peer-to-peer fundraising function. And back with our relief fund, where we crested $5 million, we had musicians, dancers, board members, staff, all fundraising on behalf of the organization. That is something San Francisco Ballet had not done before outside of the board, right? Because that's what the board, of course, does and does well. So we've taken the learnings, and it's allowed us, I feel, to be more creative, to be more nimble. And I say to my staff, if we're going to fall off the ladder, let's not fall off the bottom rung. Like, if we're going to fall, let's try these new things. And so far, knock on wood, it's worked exceptionally well. So I think technology is our friend. I think changing things because we've always done them, like, this is the time, there's no excuse not to.
And Dale, are you finding your microphone is muted right now? But are you finding that there are techniques that you've never used before, you've never considered? I mean, in terms of what Danielle was saying, I had a conversation with a very renowned artistic director, and I had proposed, this was just before the pandemic, I proposed allowing this person's artists to connect with their social media group and provide some insight into what they were doing on a day-to-day basis. And this artistic director, who's world-renowned, just sort of laughed at me, said, "There's no way I'm going to ever allow that, Mark. You're crazy. You know, I like you, I respect you as a search consultant, but you know, now what Danielle is describing is exactly what is happening in this particular case. How are you dealing with it, Dale? Are you seeing a sustained change?"
Of course, yeah. So on top of just the technical data systems, as Danielle outlined, you know, we're doing that same kind of thing as well. But using the technology we're trying to create what we call those lobby experiences for donors and patrons of all levels. So we're getting donors, small groups of our different donor categories together with a musician or their friends to have these little Zoom conversations with just a little musical topic, but mainly for them to socialize a little bit like they do. And right now we're in this 2-week period right now that's our normal patron, subscriber, donor appreciation weeks. The marketing department is doing that in large scale. They're offering some of these Zoom events, but they're actually pairing people into little Zoom rooms based on the night you subscribe. Like if you're a Thursday A series, we've grouped them together because you see each other in the lobbies and the hallways and outside of the box seats or the concession stands.
That's
so
cool.
we're trying to keep people together to feel that social experience. And I would say one thing, because we're all aggressively trying to push our digital products and we call them CSO sessions and our digital concerts, those are great and people are enjoying those, but we have to be really honest as we assess the impact. People aren't so much missing content as much as they're missing the personal experiences. So everyone and their dog is putting out great digital content and ours is magnificent. But I think people can see a lot of that as well every day, everything we do. But we're trying to create some of those experiences you're missing, which is a little bit of socializing where we can and so forth. But I was thrilled to make all this happen. I was thrilled to hear Danielle talk about what a good marketing partnership they've had there with development, because gosh, we all know, and Danielle, you and I have worked in a lot of similar type places and even similar cities. We know what our colleagues, I mean, we know that development marketing rub, it's a natural hard edge sometimes. And even right now, I'm on a lot of these calls, I'm hearing colleagues often talking about there's almost little communication or they're still very siloed. Here, the marketing team is, I mean, we're practically one and the same with them. They're actually creating some of the product that we're using for fundraising things and vice versa. We've got people from both departments that work every couple of days together on these teams to move messaging back and forth quickly right now to engage donors and patrons. We're sharing donor benefits with what would typically be marketing patron things in a separate. So working together with the marketing team has been just absolutely critical to our big success this past year and now, because they've got the tools to do a lot of that and the graphic designers and the thinking in that regard. So yeah, I don't know how places that haven't conquered that are going to fare in this, because look, this is also on top of all of this, it's change every day. And so, yeah, I'm just so thankful that the marketing team here in Chicago has been so creative and such fantastic partners.
So we've had a couple of questions. We were asked about the links to donate, and you both are welcome to answer that on the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. And we'll also write everybody afterwards who have registered to the Zoom call about those links. We'll get that from both Dale and from Danielle. We were also asked a couple questions about sort of the microsite Classy, Danielle, since you mentioned it. Could you just talk about how people can start what you've already completed, and then maybe if people want to connect with you, I'm sure you'd be happy to share some of that knowledge. But could you just describe how you got started with that so that others can take advantage of your experience?
Yeah, I can't actually say enough about how that works so beautifully. When we decided we had to raise some money really quickly, and we knew we wanted to be the first, like we wanted to be out the gate as fast as humanly possible. So we looked at, GoFundMe and a number of things, and then Classy, somehow somebody had shared it with me kind of in the past. And so I said, well, just take a peek at that. So my staff did their incredible due diligence. We signed the contract. We worked with marketing again. So it's fully it's fully fleshed out. You would never know it's not our site. And we launched it. It was primarily driven by social, right? By social media, by email. We did very little USPS mail. We did do one fiscal year end piece in June, but the rest has all been digital. So we saved a pile of money. And something interesting with the Classy platform is when folks make their gift, they can, we pre-checked or populated the box that said, I want to cover the fees associated. And it was 85% of people covered their processing fees. So we're actually like even further ahead of the game than we would have been had we been processing in-house.
Oh, that's a great point. It's a great point because it doesn't erode your purpose, which is to make sure money flows to artists.
Yeah, exactly. So our initial plan was simply to use it for the relief fund and call it a day. But you sign a contract, it's 1 year. So we're like, here we are, 6 months in, 9 months in. So we actually just kind of wiped it, and we launched a Nutcracker fundraising microsite. And back to the educational piece, and there are some communities that we've served very, very well throughout the holiday season, notably Boys and Girls Clubs here in San Francisco. And the thought of that disappearing this year was troubling. So this goes back to what Dale had mentioned about marketing and development and that partnership and the blurred line. So Nutcracker brings San Francisco Ballet about $9 million per year. That $9 million per year allows us to do a whole lot of stuff. It's, typically our budget's $55 million. And we decided that we were going to go forth because we do have an HD capture that was done back in 2007. It's of this current production. And we were going to go forth and try to monetize it as best we could, either through licensing or ticketing. And my events team, they have their ear to the ground. There's very creative people who work in the events world in San Francisco, probably in the world. And we were given a demo of this virtual immersive world. So imagine when you go to a realtor's website and you take a virtual tour of someone's home. We have done that with the War Memorial Opera House. So you will go to the front. We've created snow, which of course it doesn't snow here. At least I don't think it snows. We've decorated it for the holidays with nutcrackers and trees and garlands. And I think there are 7 activities. So you pay $49, or subscribers get a discount, it's $39. And you can go all around our opera house. You then watch the HD capture when you enter the auditorium. And then there's a kind of fantastical backstage. That's something the ballet has never done. Like, this is so out of our, I'd say, comfort zone. And it launches the day after Thanksgiving. And we've sold a lot of tickets. And we're now doing virtual corporate holiday parties from tech companies that we have never been able to get a foot in the door with. So everybody's happy. The board's happy, staff's happy, dancers are happy, donors are happy.
Well, it also talks to the question of how do you create the art and the arts environment in this virtual world to connect to new audiences. We were asked an interesting question by Wafa Kanan, which is really about, and it's an issue that's near and dear to our heart, in that the people who can attend these performances need to at least be able to afford a ticket very often. And that ticket price is fairly high for certain people. So you basically exclude a whole amazing array of individuals, and very often people with the lower income spectrum, often because of the way our society works, people of color. Are you thinking about partnerships, online partnerships that allow people to experience your art who often, because of imbalances in our society, are excluded from the audience, Dale? And how do you use these platforms to connect in ways that start to engage people in this wonderful classical music that, incidentally, they are hearing on video games, right? They are seeing on Netflix shows,
sure.
Right? I mean, composers are replete. I mean, if you go to any popular culture, you see these amazing works, but you don't get to experience them orally because you're in the moment of the film. But they're there. They're all over the place, aren't they?
Yeah, and this is a great tie into 2 topics that are important here, which is digital content, but also this notion of special events, virtual special events. We are recording now a weekly series of concerts curated specifically for smaller ensembles right now, because that's what we can do in our city. But they're highly well produced, and we're streaming those every week, and they stay up for 30 days, and then we go into the next week. But so one of the things that's happened, not just during the pandemic, but in general, like I said, when we started out, it was just people playing a few things in their kitchen, and we loved it. We were so starving to see our CSO players, just our friends, play something, and that was great. Now the standard has gone up a lot. So to your point, Mark, too, even whether it be ballet, theater shows, concerts, everyone just says, well, just throw some cameras back there and tape it all and throw it out. You can't. You got to, these things we see on PBS, great orchestra concerts, or, musicals done with, those things can take hundreds of thousands of dollars to produce at that level. And people expect to see things with perfect lighting and camera angles. And that is really hard to do on a regular basis, unless, again, you invest in the equipment, the technique, the producers. Post-editing is killing all of us, I'm sure. It's taking twice as long, 3 times as long as we all imagined, because it's really good quality stuff, and editing, and it takes a while.
Plus, to edit for a symphonic performance or to edit for dance, it takes a specialist. So now you're talking about staffing in different ways. Plus, you need technologists. So you're really talking about a transformation of the organization, aren't you?
Yes, absolutely. Because score matching, and cameras don't record audio. The audio is someplace else. It all has to be matched, pieced together. But yeah. So I think doing more of that is exciting. I think how this will impact our future, I think we're finding great benefit from doing a lot of this, and we want to find ways to keep doing it when we're back, because as we all know, the year we come back, for us probably FY22, it may take a long time for audiences to come back in full. So everyone says, we'll do both. We'll do live and we'll just broadcast it. Well, again, you can't just broadcast it. You have to produce it if you're going to do it. So that's what we're all wrestling with. But I did want to say for us, we just did our Sounds of Celebration Gala, Symphony Ball, we call it, a few weeks back. And we decided it was going to be, a major fundraiser for us. And we had a $900,000 goal, and we hit about almost 920,000. So we're thrilled with that. But we decided at the time we did it, we were going to make it free to the world. We were just going to put it on our website. Everyone can see it. You can still see it now for a year. And it was really well produced. But because of the moment, we couldn't record the large orchestra. So we did some smaller performances, but we used this year to talk about all the things this orchestra is to Chicago and to its community. So it's the first time the gala is really featured heavily all the education and outreach programs we do, and major performances, and the maestro. So that was a good case of really using the technology to do something we've been wanting to do for a while, which is really remind this community of all the things we are for it. And it's a good time in a pandemic to reinforce why we think we're a cultural treasure in Chicago, for these many reasons that we're going to show you now.
And a more democratized outreach. So Danielle, we're coming to the end of our time. I'm going to give you the last word. Could you just describe what you feel the future is? And by the way, I just wanted to mention, we just completed a poll, very interesting results. We asked people to pick 3 out of 6 choices of some of the best ways that performing arts orgs can raise earning contributed revenue. The top vote getter was to have online fundraising events. And Dale, you were talking about that. Danielle, you were talking about using different technology. The second choice was more live online performance on hosted channels. And then the third area of agreement seems to be using social media. So there's an awful lot of emphasis here of using these different ways to bring people into contact, social contact, as you described, Dale, the whole issue of using services and shared platforms to engage and then to raise money, Danielle. So this is a crackable code, right? We can do this in the performing arts, can't we?
Oh, absolutely, clearly. I mean, we're on that path. So with our relief fund, we saw that 12% of the donors were not from California. So that for us that was a moment. We're like, oh, that's interesting. We didn't mail any letters out. So 12% of these people are from far, far away. And assuming that translates to our digital season, if you think about, the thought of driving to San Francisco, going downtown, parking your car, going to the opera house, it's beautiful. But why can't the world be kind of more like sports, where you can watch I don't know my sports team, 49ers on TV. For some days that you might say, I'm going to go drive and go to the stadium, enjoy it live. Like my dream would be that there's always going to be, in my world, this digital offering. And then if you want to see it live, join us. So I think it's only positive, only positive.
Well, if we go back to programs like the live broadcast of the Honeymooners, all those years ago, you had a studio audience, but really it was the virtual audience all out there in broadcast land. And we can all do that now. Yes, it will cost money, Dale, and yes, you have to pay attention to detail, Danielle, but we can do this. This is a crackable code, and with the intelligence of people like yourselves, your organizations, and others around the field, we can do this. We can ensure the classic arts thrives. Thank you so much for sharing your story. That's the Nonprofit Report attendees. Thank you for being here. We're going to go on a bit of a hiatus during the holidays, but we'll be back in January, and we'll also be sending out some information and asking for some advice on how we can shape these programs for the future. Danielle St.Germain-Gordon of San Francisco Ballet, Dale Hedding of Chicago Symphony Orchestra, thank you so much. Have a great holiday. Stay safe.
Thanks. Take care.